Braves and baseball fans, it's time to take a trip from coast to coast across Major League Baseball.
There it goes, a long drive. If it stays fair, home run.
One strike away. Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed a perfect game.
Fly ball deep left center. Grissom on the run. Yes! 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 The Atlanta Braves have given you a championship. Listen to this crowd.
Left side, Swanson to first. Braves are world champions.
Braves and baseball talk, straight from the diamond.
Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer on your home today. And Window Nation. Call the pros at Window Nation at 866-90Nation.
Here's Grant McAuley.
Hello and welcome to From the Diamond. I am Grant McAuley, live from the Kia studios of Sports Radio 92.9 The Game in Midtown for the final weekend of the 2025 Braves season. Wrapping things up in what has been just a frustrating 162-game run for the Atlanta Braves, who came into the year with such high expectations and found themselves tested and tried again and again and again, and were just unable to really put together the sustained consistency that they needed to make a run, to really get themselves on track. But we have seen perhaps some glimmers in the past couple of weeks to remind you that there is a good team in that clubhouse. It may feel like too little too late, and that might be a fair assessment of what's been going on lately. But for the Braves to kind of find a few things here late in the season, not a bad deal going into the winter. And, of course, as you look into the 2026 prism, what's this team going to look like when it gets to spring training, and how much are they going to do over the course of the winter, and just how much more can you expect out of some guys who either had to deal with lack of performance or injury or a little bit of both? We'll see. All those questions are not going to be answered today, but we are going to talk a little bit about what has been the state of affairs for the Braves here down the stretch. I'll look back a little bit on what the season has been, and I guess more importantly, what it has not been for this team. And we're also going to delve into, I think, one of the more interesting stories here in this final week, and that is the unexpected return of Charlie Morton. The circumstances, not exactly what you would expect when you bring in a pitcher that has had the career that Charlie has. And, of course, I think everybody was very familiar with him from him spending the last 4 years with Atlanta. But a couple of stops in the American League, and now finally finding his way back to the Braves, where I think it pretty much points toward that last opportunity to close a career out with the team that you started with a team that you won the World Series for, and have that one final outing. That's going to happen on Sunday. I caught up with a number of Charlie Morton's teammates to get their thoughts on not just the fact that Charlie has come back for this final week, but by and large, what has he meant to this club in his tenure over that 4-year run from 2021 to 2024, and how many guys he influenced, how many guys I think that he was able to maybe encourage, and how many pitchers were able to learn a little bit of something from somebody who was able to put together the kind of career that Charlie Morton has. So we'll get into all of that. Don't want to jump into it here immediately. We will, I guess, parse through a little bit of what's been the recent going for the Atlanta Braves, because it has been a little bit more encouraging. But I can understand, and I do, I'm on social media, so I certainly understand how the game works. And you can follow me at Grant McAuley on most platforms. You can also subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcast while you're out there doing all of that. Appreciate that as always. And if you're nice enough to do that, please leave a rating and a review. So with that shameless plugging out of the way, I'm out there. I'm active, having the discussions, and if they're good, if they're bad, if they're somewhere in between, it all goes over the course of the 162 games that you play during a baseball season. The Braves, unfortunately, have just had, it feels like, some longer and more sustained lows than they've been able to enjoy those highs. But this 10-game winning streak that they went on kind of saved them from the precipice, I think, of maybe being a club that flirts with 100 losses. That had not happened and has not happened in quite some time for the Braves. I believe the late 80s will be the last time you could see one of those 100-loss seasons. But it also, I think, has saved them from a 90-loss season, which may not sound like much to hang your hat on, and in fact it is not, when you come in expecting to win 95 or more games and win the National League East and go into the playoffs and have a chance to win a World Series, those, of course, being the checklist that the Braves were reading from when they reported to Northport back in September. I can understand how that 10-game winning streak really isn't going to change much in the big picture, but I think that there were some guys in there, and it's been a question, a conversation that has been had a lot, I think, in this last couple of weeks about, being able to know that this team is still capable of doing that. And you hear guys like Chris Sale or a guy like Matt Olson say, well, we knew we were capable of doing that, and it kind of underscores how we feel like we should have been playing all season. Now, if you've been watching this and been disappointed in it, I understand that. If you are a player on the Atlanta Braves club, though, not only are you kind of having to see these losses pile up, but you're living in that space. And I don't think anybody was enjoying that altogether too much. But with the things that have happened, the way that things transpired, it's just been one of those years where, unfortunately, it got late early for the Braves. And when they weren't able to go on some kind of big, heroic run, maybe call it a 10-game winning streak right out of the All-Star break, this season just was not going to afford them the chance to really get back into things. And I've talked about this throughout the last week on social and on some of my call-ins that I've done here on the station as well. The difference in a club that's sitting where the Braves are sitting right now and a team that is in the wild card hunt in that final week is basically one win per month. And I think we talked about this on the show last week. I mean, a 7-game losing streak right out of the gate for a club to rally from that and make it to the postseason, you already knew those odds were going to be long. But there was a lot of baseball left to be played at that point. So forgive me if the 155 games after that didn't leave some area or some margin for hope. But as the season went on, and some of those lows, not just a 7-game losing streak, but then kind of just falling apart in the month of June, month of July, then you kind of knew where you were going to be or where you were. Unfortunately, where you're not going. But the Braves, as you look at them today at 75 and 85 with 2 games to go against the Pittsburgh Pirates this weekend, 20 games out of first place. And, of course, the Phillies clinched the National League East a week ago. They're a 95-win club heading into the postseason. Only the Milwaukee Brewers have won more games than the Philadelphia Phillies in all of baseball, actually. The Brewers are a 96-win club heading into their final couple of games. And then you got the Dodgers out west. They've got a 91-win team. American League East, and maybe we should talk about this for a minute. Things are not even close to settled. The Yankees are giving the Blue Jays quite a run here late. The Jays, it's kind of a bad time to fall into a slump. They've lost 6 out of 10, while the Yankees have won 9 out of 10. And with 2 games to go, that still has to be decided. There's also a tie at the top of the American League Central. A couple of 86-win teams, but the Cleveland Guardians. I mean, this is a club that I think in the middle of the summer they lost 10 games in a row. Then in September they win 10 games in a row. And the Detroit Tigers, as of, I believe it was September the 10th, it's the stat that I saw, the Tigers had a 99.9% chance of winning the American League Central. The fact that they are tied with 2 games to go, and Cleveland owns the tiebreaker, by the way, that is quite the drama, the high drama for the final couple of games. Tigers have lost 9 out of 10. Cleveland has won 7 out of 10. That's how they got all tied up there. And the Seattle Mariners, how about them clinching a postseason berth, clinching the American League West for the first time since the 2001 Mariners. And that was the team that set the wins record that year. That was Ichiro's rookie year. You were a couple of years, I guess, removed from King Griffey Jr. He was going into his second year in Cincinnati at that point. Not to age all of us with that statement. It's still weird to think of Griffey in a Reds uniform, but that's a different discussion for a different time. They were able to take the American League West away from the Houston Astros. In fact, they were able to do it pretty much head-to-head to knock out their opponent there. Now, the Astros, when you look at the wild card, yeah, they're still right in the mix there. They have an opportunity with just 1 game out, but 2 games to go to climb into that spot. The Detroit Tigers hanging on by the thinnest of margins to that final spot. And then you've got the Yankees, who are playoff bound with the top wild card spot. The Boston Red Sox after that with an 88-win club going on there. So it's really a battle for that final wild card spot that you see between the Tigers and the Astros, and then the battle for the American League Central, the battle for the American League East. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things going on, if you will. And the Yankees and the Blue Jays obviously could switch spots depending on how this next couple of days goes as they close out the season. But this is what Major League Baseball was looking at when they expanded the playoffs, was hoping to have some dramatics, hoping to have a lot of playoff spots still undecided. The National League, meanwhile, not to bury the lead here, but it's pretty fascinating here in this final couple of days as well, because the New York Mets, they have not been able to find any sustained success down the stretch. In fact, they have been coughing up this lead for what feels like about 30 days. And then you look at the Cincinnati Reds, who have just been allowed to hang around, and now they have tied the Mets for that final wild card spot in the National League. It's a 7 out of 10 run for the Reds to do that. The Mets just 5-5 in their last 10, and losing some games that, quite honestly, they should not be losing down the stretch, which is going to make it pretty difficult for a club that's spending, I believe, $340 million on its payroll. That's going to be a pretty tough winter to get through. Not that anybody down here is going to be feeling sorry for the New York Mets state of affairs. The Cubs, top wildcard club, 90-70 heading into the final couple of days. The Padres at 88-72. They are the second wildcard seed, and then that third one has to be decided between the Reds and the Mets. And the Arizona Diamondbacks were hanging around as well. They're a couple of games off that pace, so it would be quite a turn of events for, I think, the Diamondbacks to push their way in there. I don't know how the tiebreakers work on all that, and I'm certainly not going to waste the time on the air to look it all up. But, you just want to be that club, to get back to my point, that has that opportunity to be in that mix. And the difference is, over a 6-month baseball season of the Braves potentially being one of those clubs and being where they are right now at 75 and 85, it's not just, hey, don't lose 7 in a row coming right out of the gate, although that would obviously help. It's 1 win a month. That's what we're talking about here. With the Braves being, the difference in them being where they are, 10 games under 500, and being a club that is, say, 81 and 79. Something along those lines that would put them right where the Reds and the Mets are, right in the mix of things. But they're just not there. And they have known they're not going to be there for quite some time. And those one-run losses that we've talked about all season long, and hopefully we can put that conversation to bed at least until next year when they have the opportunity to set a different trend, that's been as costly as anything. The Braves have played more one-run games than any team in baseball. They have lost more one-run games than any team in baseball. But the way that they've done it has kind of flipped, because they went through all the pitching problems in the middle of the season with all the injuries to the starting rotation, which was really propping the Braves up over the first 3 months. The Braves had a top 10 ERA in baseball prior to going into that tailspin in late June and into July, and especially in the second half when the wheels fell off for the Braves pitching staff. They were allowing, I think, 3.8 runs per game, but they were only scoring 4.1 runs per game. Now in the second half, they're scoring 5 runs a game, but they're allowing over 5 runs per game. So it's just been kind of a frustrating march for this Atlanta Braves club. And I think that at this point, we kind of know some of the things that need to be fixed and some of the aspects that really set you apart as one of those clubs that can be in a wild card position at this point or a postseason contention spot. You got to win one-run games. You got to win close games. You got to find a way to win consistently. And sometimes it just comes down to something as small as just a handful of games that got away over the course of a season is, again, the difference between sitting where you are right now, way out of the picture, and being maybe right there in the mix as one of those teams that could be potentially having that opportunity to at least punch its ticket to the postseason and have that puncher's chance. I think we know a lot about the postseason in baseball, and that's expect the unexpected. It's completely unpredictable. And I don't think it matters how hot you are in the month of September as much as it matters what you are then able to do against every single matchup that you get throughout the month of October. I don't remember who wrote about that, but I read a very good article this past week about momentum in baseball being so different than momentum heading into the playoffs for a lot of other sports, just because of the, I think this is a word, randomosity of what you're about to face, and the fact that, hey, everybody is kind of in the same position. You just want to get in. You just want to have that chance. And the Braves, they just didn't get that chance this year, and that is unfortunate, but it is kind of where it is. So now that I've delivered the eulogy for the 2025 Braves season, I think we can move on, and I do want to talk about celebrating a career, a very impressive career, and that is Charlie Morton, who is back with the Braves as of this week, claimed off waivers from the Tigers. I got a chance yesterday to catch up with a lot of his teammates, guys who have played with him for a very long time, to kind of, I guess, run the gamut of what Charlie Morton meant to the Atlanta Braves and the career that he has had, and I think one of the more inspirational figures, if you will, in baseball, and at least amongst his teammates as well, because you don't see a lot of guys that get a chance to pitch 18 years in the big leagues, and their first, let's say, 8 or 9 really aren't all that remarkable. But the final 8 or 9 are pretty much the prime of his career. He was a late bloomer with Charlie Morton, but a lot of good things that he was able to pass along in his time with this Atlanta Braves club, in addition to being the guy who pitched on a broken freaking leg in Game 1 of the World Series in 2021 and helped the Braves win that whole thing. You'll hear from some of Charlie Morton's teammates, Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Pierce Johnson, Bryce Elder. I caught up with all of them yesterday at Truist Park. We'll get to that next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app.
Now, more From the Diamond with Grant McAuley. Brought to you by Mark Spain Real Estate. Get a guaranteed offer from Mark Spain Real Estate. 855-299-SOLD. On Sports Radio 92.9 The Game.
Welcome back into From the Diamond with Grant McAuley here on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We're live from the Kia studios, closing out the season for the Atlanta Braves As challenging as it has been, and we have certainly talked about all of those stories for all of these months, we'll talk about them a little bit more going along, but I want to stick a pin in all of that for a moment to kind of talk about one of the guys that was integral to the Braves' success that they have enjoyed over the 7 years coming into 2025 before the train did obviously go off the tracks. But some very good things were done in the early part of this particular decade. In 2020, obviously, the Braves and the rest of baseball had to kind of adapt to that shortened season, but Atlanta was able to push its way all the way into the NLCS and able to do so without really having the starting rotation intact. So when they went into the offseason of 2021, looking to not only get back to the NLCS, but win the World Series, which, spoiler alert, worked out pretty well. One of the gentlemen that they went out and got was Charlie Morton, because they felt like they needed a proven veteran ace to step to the front of this pitching staff, which was not a knock on Max Fried. You wanted quantity of the quality, and you needed somebody, I think a right-handed starter, to really step in and do some things. And it's somebody that you could count on because they had a track record. And Charlie Morton was one of those guys. He had pitched for the Astros and for the Tampa Bay Rays at a very high level as a late bloomer in his career, mid to late 30s, really, before Charlie Morton's career took off. And I think that's a testament to the perseverance that he showed. But he turned himself into one of the better strikeout pitchers in baseball, and he turned himself into a guy that you could depend on every fifth day to take the ball and go out there and battle and give you a chance to win. And that's what Charlie did between 2021 and 2024. But before I get to talking about his resume and the durability and some of those things, the opportunity to bring Charlie back in a season in which the Braves have had may not seem like a major story. And maybe it's not front page news, coast to coast. But in terms of what he meant to the franchise and what he meant in a very important, period of the franchise's history, and to the 26 men in that clubhouse year after year, I thought it was important to kind of figure out what it is that makes Charlie Morton such a popular figure, such a well-respected figure. So I thought I'll just go straight to the source. The first guy you're going to hear from is Austin Riley, who played alongside Charlie Morton for those 4 years, won the World Series alongside Charlie Morton, who did so while pitching on a broken ankle. And Charlie's the only guy in baseball history, as far as I know, that pitched on a broken leg, broken ankle, and apologized for not throwing more pitches. I mean, that's just who he was. And the Braves, obviously, I think, went on to win that for a variety of different reasons, despite a depleted starting rotation, despite losing Charlie Morton. But I do think that was one of those kind of inspirational moments that just kind of reminded you got to go out there and fight for it. So let's hear from Austin Riley as he reflects on his teammate, Charlie Morton. You played with Charlie Morton throughout the first 4 years that he was here, I guess, which was his second stint around here. Yeah. But long story short, Charlie comes in, a veteran pitcher, brought a lot to the rotation when it was kind of in that state of needing somebody to be the front of the line guy. Yeah. But he was also a guy that just took the ball every fifth day. Yeah. How would you describe him from a continuity standpoint, I guess a quiet leadership standpoint, wherever you kind of saw how he fit on this club?
For me, Charlie's one of a kind. I've used that for like a wash, but it's a different one of a kind. Charlie's just one of the nicest human beings I've ever come across. He loves the game. His preparation is unbelievable. He cares so much, and just like I said, just a genuinely good human being. And what he did, in the World Series, pitching with a broken ankle, just shows like it's the quiet bulldog in him. It's not just a nice guy. He's got some fight in him, and he's done it for so long, and I think that shows. So happy to see him back, and he loves it around here, and so just happy for him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how meaningful was it? I know this is a season that's had a lot more lows than anybody wanted to, and here in this last week, it may not seem like there's a whole lot to necessarily circle on the calendar, but having Charlie back to make one more start, that has to mean a lot to him and mean a lot to the club.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Just like you said, what he's meant to the organization, for us to give him that opportunity, I think it's you got to earn it and you got to deserve it, and he certainly does that. So just take it in the next couple of days with him.
Now, Charlie Morton will make that start on Sunday. A really great story there. Initially, when Charlie was claimed off waivers from the Tigers, it was just to kind of come in, give him that opportunity to come full circle and finish his career where he started it, and a place where not too long ago he was a big part of the success that the Braves have enjoyed. But then a funny thing happened on the way to Sunday. The Braves decided, let's let Charlie Morton start that game. Chris Sale, I think, was no small part of that, with the respect that he has to kind of defer and say, look, Let's let Charlie go out there and start this game. I'll come in and pitch when he's done, get my final innings in for the year. But I think that was just one of the cool things about that. You can just see the respect and hear the respect that the Braves have had for Charlie Morton, and that's one of the reasons why he was brought in here and given this opportunity. Next guy I caught up with was Pierce Johnson, who, is a guy that his career has not been kind of a linear progression either. He's had to go all over to find some success, and certainly has been part of the Braves bullpen the past few years and doing his part there. But one of those guys that I like to go to just to kind of get the perspective, because I never feel like it's lost on him, just what exactly it meant to bring back a guy like Charlie Morton at this time. And again, the context is key. We know what the season hasn't been, but that opportunity to just kind of revisit something and someone and welcome them back in to close out a very good career. So here is Pierce Johnson talking about his teammate, Charlie Morton. How would you describe Charlie Morton, the teammate, the pitcher, and how excited were you to see him walk back through the door one more time?
I mean, there isn't enough words to describe Charlie Morton. He's a fountain of youth, number one. I mean, the guy's in his 40s throwing mid to upper 90s still with an unbelievable curveball that I try to throw. But the amount of happiness when that guy walked through this locker room, I mean, it was like we clinched playoffs. Like, people don't understand the kind of person that Charlie is and what he brings to a clubhouse. You can't put a number on it. You can't quantify it. You can't. He is such an incredible human that you want to be around him. You want him to have success. And it was sad when he was not with us in spring training, but every time he was on TV, I mean, we're glued to the TV watching him throw, even when he's on the opposing team. So, just an incredible, most genuine human. Man, it's just so good to have him back.
I know a lot of focus goes into what happens on the field, whether that be good, whether it be bad, whether it be indifferent, but this clubhouse, the group, 26 guys it is at any point during the year, you just kind of touched on it, just how invaluable it is to have guys who have had a lot of time in this game, that have a lot to offer, that you can learn from by talking to them, you can learn from them by observing them, and I feel like Charlie Morton has checked an awful lot of boxes in his time with the Braves.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a good person for the younger guys to bounce things off of, right? He's had the highs, he's had the lows, but he's also had a ton of success, and he's doing it at a later age. And I mean, how many guys make it as far as he has in this game? I mean, he's made a good amount of money, most of his money towards the end of his career, right? He's had to reinvent himself. He was throwing kind of like Roy Halladay early in his career in Pittsburgh, and then he came and he got to Houston, and he was just started throwing petrol and obviously his great off speed. So he's had a lot of trial and error, but he figured out what's worked for him, and I think he's a great guy for the young guys to learn from, and just always have around.
It's a great guy to have around, and I do think a lot of those Braves pitchers have learned from him. We're going to hear from one of those in a couple of minutes. But Pierce Johnson brought up something very interesting about the reinvention of Charlie Morton. So I went back and looked, because I know the numbers. I know his career and the path of it. But age 24 to 32, Charlie Morton was 46-71 with an ERA over 4.5, and he averaged about 6.5 strikeouts per 9. Then he signed with the Astros at age 33, and they said, look, you got a great fastball. You don't need to be throwing that sinker, and we'd like you to just throw your fastball and your curveball primarily. Don't worry about throwing anything else. And Charlie Morton just took off. He won 14 games his first year with the Astros, and from age 33 to age 41 into this year, 101 wins against 63 losses, a sub-4 ERA at 3.87, and he struck out nearly 1,600 batters in 1,373 innings. So he turned himself into a great strikeout pitcher in that reinvention and that latter career high, if you want to call it that. I think that's something every pitcher would like to have the opportunity to find, and Charlie Morton is just an example that if you work hard enough and you persevere, you certainly can. Next guy I caught up with was Matt Olson, who has been Charlie's teammate for a handful of years as well, and got to see the veteran leader that Charlie is, the guy who takes the ball every fifth day, takes a lot of pride in being, part of the continuity of the club, and also has a voice that's important inside the four walls of that clubhouse. So I asked Matt Olson what exactly it is that makes Charlie Morton such a special teammate.
Charlie's just all-time guy, to be doing what he's doing at his age, shows the talent he has, shows the person he is. Can't find anybody in the game who doesn't appreciate Charlie Morton, so it'd be cool to, have him. I think Sundays he's starting that game, right? So it'll be, a really special moment for him and, for all of us too.
I know you talked about it's hard to find anybody in the game that doesn't appreciate him. What would you say that he brought every fifth day when he went out there, but also just as that veteran presence? I know that's kind of a ubiquitous baseball term. You hear it a lot. It's hard to define, but you kind of know it when you see it, what he brought to this club on just a regular basis.
Yeah, I think Charlie's kind of like the guy who he doesn't say a lot, but when he does, it's meaningful. And I think, to me, that's like the true veteran kind of presence that we talk about. And his words carry a lot of weight. If a guy ever does need advice or there's a situation going on or whatever, and Charlie's speaking up, then, it's kind of like everybody's all ears. He's been in the game for so long, and he's been a reliever, he's been a starter, he's been a sinker baller, he's been a four-seam guy. He's done everything. So he's got experience in every facet of it. So I think that is like the main point when you think about like what he actually brings. It's always going to be through experience, but the way he handles portraying it and handled those experiences is what makes it better than most.
And he made those experiences relatable. And by doing so, he was able to help younger pitchers. And it doesn't mean, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds that you encounter in spring training, but just some of the guys that he would run across that maybe had gotten to the big leagues and still had a thing or two to learn from him, like a Spencer Strider or a Max Fried, or a guy like Bryce Elder who got to the big leagues, had an opportunity, but had to continue to grind for it to work from it, or to work for it to continue to have that chance. I caught up with Bryce Elder as well because I felt like he was one of those guys that just got to sit under the learning tree and just appreciate what Charlie Morton had to offer, even if it was as simple as just watching him pitch every fifth day and trying to model yourself after that consistency. Here's Bryce Elder.
Well, let me ask you about a longtime teammate of yours who's back here for the final week of what could be the final year of his career. You got to pitch alongside Charlie Morton. I'm sure you got to learn from Charlie Morton, if for nothing else, than by just kind of observing how he goes about it. Can you describe, the presence that Charlie has in his clubhouse and how much he means to this pitching staff?
Yeah, I think you only, every so often you get a couple guys that are around as long as him, and I was lucky to have him and Chavi and even Sale, to that point where Sale is kind of a unique guy because he's never, he would tell you he struggled at times in his career, but his struggle is a little different than most people's struggle. But somebody like Charlie who really, he'll tell you wasn't very good early in his career, and then to figure it out as his career's gone on, I think that's why it's been hard for him to retire, is because his best years have been in the last 5 years. So I think having a guy around like him, it gets lost in today's game with how quick everything moves, whether it's getting sent up or down or moving teams. Having a guy around like him, I've never seen just how he plays the long game. He never panics. He never gets bent out of shape. He understands that if you're going to want to play for 15 years, then you're not going to be able to get all bound up, bent out of shape about one thing that happens in 2025, So his presence, the calming presence of how he understands it's a very, very long road. It does happen quick. You probably ask him that, and he'll tell you that his career is always quick, even though if you play 15 years. But his ability to kind of just see things in a broad, kind of overview it's impressive. And I know he's been around a long time, so it's easier now, I'm sure, than it was back when he was younger. But to have that thought process and have that around and kind of bleed into us, I know with me getting sent up and down, sometimes it's like I didn't pitch good, going back down. He's calming presence, kind of to understand hey, if you plan on playing this game for a long time, it's going to be worse than it is now, so learn how to handle it and be ready for it next time it comes up. So it means a lot for him to be able to come back. I think whoever was in charge of getting him back here, Alex, Terry, whoever, that's a pro move there. So I appreciate them doing that. I thought in Detroit I didn't know that he was going to be coming back, so I got him to sign the lineup card when I pitched against him and everything, so I'll have that forever. So he's meant the world to me, and he's taught me so much, so it'd be fun to see him go out there. What is his last time? You never know. We'll see.
So Bryce Elder went from thinking he was going to be the last mound opponent of Charlie Morton to being able to share the locker room with him for one more week as Charlie makes that start again. That's going to happen on Sunday. Chris Sale will pitch after that, and I think it's kind of interesting. 38 years ago today, Phil Niekro came back to make one final start for the Braves. And it wasn't really about the numbers. It was about welcoming back that Braves legend. And while Charlie Morton may not be Phil Niekro, he may not be heading to the Hall of Fame, a 300-game winner, but the respect that he has across the game, it's going to be, I think, a meaningful Sunday, meaningful moment for this Braves club. When we come back, we'll hear more from Bryce Elder. We'll also talk a little bit about what else is going on for the Braves as they close out the 2025 season. It comes your way next on From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app. Welcome back in to From the Diamond with Grant McAuley on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game. We are live from the Kia Studios, closing out the season, the weekend for the Atlanta Braves, and closing out this edition of From the Diamond, the final one that'll be on the airwaves. The podcast, of course, though, will continue over the course of the winter, so I invite you to check that out. Subscribe to From the Diamond, wherever you get your podcast. You'll be able to find that. And I'll have some interviews, some conversations, and some breakdowns of what we hope will be an interesting winter. Just unfortunately, all that stuff is starting earlier than the Braves had planned on in 2025. And you heard a little bit from some of the teammates of Charlie Morton, the last one of which was Bryce Elder, a young pitcher coming up in the organization who was able to learn from a veteran, and a guy that I think has kind of had to grind it out this year to prove once again his value and his place on this Atlanta Braves club. Bryce Elder finished the season leading Atlanta in starts and innings pitched, something that nobody saw coming back in spring training. In fact, that stat in and of itself tells you exactly how injured, how banged up the Braves rotation was this year. But I caught up with Bryce Elder to get his thoughts on what he was able to accomplish here in 2025, the opportunity, even though it comes from, a place that no player wants it to, from injury to somebody else. Somebody still had to go out there and cover those innings. The Braves, familiar with Bryce Elder, obviously giving him that opportunity and just trying to make the most of it. And, of course, how he looks at his future in the Braves organization. And this is my conversation with Bryce Elder from Truist Park yesterday.
This year for you, obviously an opportunity that was born out of a need for this club, having to kind of navigate a lot of these injuries. You've been around this team a lot. You've seen some of the ups. You've seen some of the downs. How would you kind of describe the 2025 ride that you were on?
I think you can look at it, on paper, just kind of, I thought I had a pretty good year other than, 3 outings that were just, give up 8 spots in 3 outings. So it's hard to have good numbers when you look at 3 starts like that. But if I take it kind of as a whole, I thought I threw the ball pretty well a lot. Obviously had the bumps in the road, but I was pleased with with the circumstances that we were in with the injuries. I was able to have a chance to fail up here, and I'm not going to say I figured it out because it's not possible, but I thought I made some strides in the right direction as far as kind of dealing with the failure and the ups and downs. I thought my stuff was pretty bad for a while, and I thought I got a little better, and I started making some pitches when I needed to. So I was pleased with kind of how I finished up, even though on paper it doesn't look great. I was kind of pleased with how I responded and to some of the rough ones and just kind of kept rolling.
Yeah, and that's really all you can do is kind of make those adjustments as you go along. If I told you in spring training that you were going to lead the Braves in starts and innings pitched, I don't know if you would have believed me, but that's kind of how we ended up here. Again, circumstances not all what you want, but there's a lot of opportunity that was baked into that. So as you go into the winter and you reflect on this or kind of project forward, what do you kind of think about moving into 2026 with what you were able to learn, adjust, or otherwise, grow from?
Yeah, I think kind of the last 7 or 8, 9 starts, I thought my stuff kind of had a tick up, not just from a velocity standpoint, but I think strikeouts were up, walks were down. So it's kind of one of those deals, it's a long year. Kind of the way I was trending, I wouldn't mind having 3 or 4 more starts, but it's part of it. Kind of it ends when it ends. So kind of same plan as last offseason, be able to be prepared and be able to be ready to stay healthy. Obviously, like you said, there's in a game of stuff and strikeouts and everything, there's still a place for the person who stays healthy and can eat innings. It may not be the prettiest thing always, but this year, especially when my ERA was so inflated, that's kind of what I took pride in, eating innings and giving us a chance, and I think I was able to kind of hold it together down the stretch. So I was pleased with it. Kind of the same approach going into next year, just be ready to go in February, whenever we show up. So it'll be the same.
Now, that was Braves pitcher Bryce Elder, who I got a chance to catch up with, obviously talk a little bit about his season and also a chance to reflect on what Charlie Morton meant coming back to this club. But really, as you look at what Bryce Elder meant here in 2025, it was somebody who could come out there and at least give the Braves a quantifiable name to put in their rotation on that day in that starting pitcher slot, because that, by the middle of the year, became more of a question, more of a Russian roulette, if you will, for the Braves as far as the starters were concerned. They used 18 different starting pitchers this year. Charlie Morton, when he starts on Sunday, will be number 19. That is a franchise record. That will be the most in Major League Baseball as well, because the Braves also not only set a franchise record by using 46 pitchers thus far this year. When Charlie Morton pitches on Sunday, they will break the Major League record for most pitchers used in a single season that the Mets just set about 2 weeks ago. So I guess some other things could happen for the New York club over the final couple of days. I don't know how many pitchers they have left to call up, but the Braves have used a ton of starting pitchers. Elder's final line, when you look at it, as you heard him talk about, he's aware of what the numbers are and what the numbers aren't, but 8-11 with a 5.30 ERA. He made 28 starts through 156 1/3 innings. Those starts, those innings, the most on the Braves staff. You look at that ERA, that 5.30 ERA, and I know this is not how it works, but if you were looking for just overall how much or how often he was pitching better than not, 25 of the earned runs that he allowed this year came in 3 starts. In his other 25 starts, he pitched to about a 4 ERA, and I think that that's fair to ask for from a guy like Bryce Elder, who's had some big league experience, who's had some ups, some downs, and just continues to grind, just continues to battle. So we'll see how exactly he factors into next year's plans. I believe that Bryce Elder and the Braves used his final option year. This year he had one option remaining coming into the season. I know there's some technicalities and things based on the service time or amount of time that you spend in the minors, but I think you kind of walk into 2026 looking at it and saying, if Bryce Elder is going to lead your club and starts and innings pitched again, you're probably not in the place that you want to be. But look, credit where it's due. Somebody had to go out there and give this club some innings, and I think Bryce Elder really answered that call for the Braves very, very well this year. Looking at some of the other starting pitching things going on for the Braves thus far, Alek Manoah was claimed on Friday. He's a 27-year-old former Blue Jays ace. He was, I believe, third in the American League Cy Young voting back in 2022, an all-star. His big league career, though, has fallen from grace due to injury and a lot of other things that have just kind of pulled him off the course that he was on, but still just 27. I guess the question is for the Braves, can they fix him? Is this just a project? I think the answer to that last question is yes. It's kind of a lottery ticket, if you will, because if you can get something out of him and he hasn't pitched in the big leagues this year, then maybe you're able to find some value at that point. But I don't think the Braves are hanging their hat on, hey, we just solved our starting pitching depth by solely making this move. There's still a lot to parse through, a lot to look into this winter that could get the Braves back on track as far as that is concerned. But it's an interesting name and a guy that, again, is well under 30 and could have something to offer. The Braves just have to find out if they can get that out of Alek Manoah, and we'll find out, I guess, beginning next spring. Now, Hurston Waldrop wrapped up his season on Tuesday against the Washington Nationals with 6 innings of one-run ball, picked up 5 strikeouts there, and he closes out his year with 10 games, 9 of them starts, but I'll call it 10 starts because he had to come into that Speedway Classic game and basically start that game because the Braves weren't able to get very far on the night before. Finished with a 2.88 ERA, 56 and a third innings, 55 punch-outs, 22 walks. The walks were still there sometimes, but for the most part, I felt like he was able to really work around the base runners. He limited hits. He limited homers. So you have to like that when you're able to miss bats as well, and I think he's really staked a claim on the 5th starter spot heading into spring training. But again, as I just said, and as I've been saying for a number of weeks, this has got to be a priority for the Atlanta Braves. You can look at, and Brian Snitker said this week, you can look at some of the names, and obviously you know what they're capable of, but they have to be healthy to be able to do those things. And those are guys like Reynaldo Lopez, like Grant Holmes, like Spencer Schwellenbach, not to bury the lead there with the best of those 3, but you've got to see them get back to spring training healthy. And Reynaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes are both throwing in Florida right now. They're looking to face hitters in a live BP session or 2 or 3 maybe before they head home for the winter. Spencer Schwellenbach, that's his goal as well. He's still throwing in Atlanta and could join them at some point in the coming days or weeks and do all of the same things and face those hitters and try to have a normal winter, not one that spent rehabbing for the 3 of them. And can all 3 of them be healthy for the spring and remain healthy over the course of the 162-game marathon that follows? The interesting caveat, of course, with Holmes and with Lopez is that they could shift into the bullpen. And Reynaldo Lopez has said, I view myself as a starter. The Braves have said they view him as a starter, but the fact is that both parties are aware if it would make sense for him to be in that reliever's role, it's one that could help the club. So I think they'll cross that bridge when they get there. Same thing with Grant Holmes, though he doesn't have as many innings in the big leagues as Reynaldo Lopez has. I think that those are a couple of guys you could look at if it's ways to strengthen the bullpen, and the way that you make your whole pitching staff better is go find a veteran starter, a proven starter, somebody that can cover a lot of innings and bring stability to that rotation. And that means that Reynaldo Lopez could help you out in the bullpen, or Grant Holmes could help you out in the bullpen, or heck, maybe both of them could help you out in the bullpen at some point. Those are the kind of options you want to have. Those are the kind of things that you want to have available to you to be able to tackle this problem, because the Braves' pitching injuries in 2025 were most definitely a problem. They were not the only thing that cost the Braves this year. 3 months of underperformance at the plate to start the season when you did have most of your pitching staff and guys were pitching extremely well, whether that was Sale and Schwellenbach or Grant Holmes or whoever it was, A.J. Smith-Shawver, who's also out for, I believe, all of 2026. You just didn't do enough offensively. And when you go back to what I talked about at the start of the show with the, hey, 1 win a month could be the difference in sitting where you are right now, eliminated from the postseason, closing your year out tomorrow, or being alive in the wild card race for the final 48 hours, I think you can say, that's one of those what ifs that's going to kind of bug you about the 2025 Braves, particularly when you throw in all those 1-run losses that they have. It was just that close, but not to be, because ultimately you are the team that your record says that you are, and you've got to get into the offseason and figure out the ways to get that much better in those spots. The Braves tried 18 different starting pitchers, 46 different pitchers overall over the course of this year. And bringing back Raisel Iglesias next year, I think, to help out the bullpen would certainly be helpful if we're kind of looking at ways to make that group a little bit better. Whether or not Reynaldo Lopez or Grant Holmes factor in, I think you still need a couple of veteran or proven relievers who can help you. Tyler Kinley, I think, was a very nice pickup for the Braves, picking him up from the Colorado Rockies, much as they did Pierce Johnson a few years ago. Very, very similar when you look at those numbers, too. Pierce was a ERA over 6, had some saves under his belt, but really not putting together the season that he wanted to have in Colorado in 2022. Came over to the Braves and flipped that switch, and he's been a very good, very important part of the bullpen for the last 3 years. I don't know if Tyler Kinley will be one of those guys that's able to step into a bigger or more important role next year, but if you're looking at a guy in the 6th or 7th inning that could help you out, I think he's shown you everything you need to see. And for a $5 million option, and you look at the price of relievers across baseball, it may sound like a bunch of money because, look, if you or I find $5 million, it is a lot of money. But in terms of that market, that could be a pretty good price tag to have for Tyler Kinley, who has pitched very, very well since coming over. But some free agent relievers, making a trade, figuring out, what kind of arms they can get in to strengthen that bullpen. I know as we go back and look at 2025 and some of the things that they just didn't have out of the gate, handling that bullpen was a big part of it. I think they were a couple of relievers light when they came into the season. And over the course of the year, obviously a lot of things have happened, and I don't think that the Braves were 2 relievers away from going to the playoffs or anything, but I think it certainly could have helped at times. And when you have this many injuries, it's hard to find the true answer to it other than everybody just needs to get healthier. But quantity and quality are some things the Braves should be looking at over the course of the winter to make this pitching staff and this club just a little bit better. That's going to wrap up my time here, though, on From the Diamond for the 2025 season. I appreciate all of you guys making me a part of your weekend, part of your baseball podcast regimen. You can subscribe to From the Diamond wherever you get your podcasts. We'll keep it going over the course of the offseason. Always appreciate all of the various members of the Atlanta Braves and the various members of the baseball media across the country at the very least, for joining me on the show. Have had a lot of fun discussions all year long. And again, thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time for some baseball talk right here on From the Diamond. For my producer, Josh, I am Grant McAuley. This has been From the Diamond on Sports Radio 92.9 The Game and the Odyssey app. And until next time, so long, everyone.